Okay, lesson 7, a little introduction to some segment effects. So there's 3 different types of effects that you can do in Avid, and it's important to know the names of all 3 of them for the Avid user certification exam. There is transition effects. Transition effects are dissolves or anything that goes in between 2 clips, so you're transitioning from one clip to another. The second type of effect is a segment effect, or an effect that goes on an actual segment or clip in the timeline. For example, here we have a flop, here we have a resize. So those are the second types of effects. Third is a motion effect. And we're not going to cover that today, but it's important to know that motion effects are the third types of effects that you can use when using Avid. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about stabilizing shaky footage. We're going to talk about using the automatic color correction and the fluid morph and resizing shots. And then finally we'll talk about a few little keyframes. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work with some shaky camera footage. So if you look right here, if you watch this right here, you can see how it's the camera is kind of shaky. And we don't want it to be shaky. We want it to be steady, okay? Well, they obviously didn't have a tripod, so we're going to use Avid to fix this problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my effect editor, or my effect palette. I'm going to go into Image, and I'm going to find the stabilization tool. Stabilize, which is right here. So I'm going to click and drag that right onto my clip. And you'll notice as soon as I put that on the clip, I'm getting all of these little green little dots right here. So what Avid is doing is it's automatically readjusting the clip so that way it balances out the shakiness. So when I play it, it should be a lot steadier than it was before we put the restabilizing effect on there. So let's just take a look at that once again. You can see the before. Okay, his head's jerking around pretty good. And then I put the stabilize effect on there. It does its little thing. And when I play it, it's a lot less steady, or it's a lot less jittery. Okay? And what it's doing, Avid is actually going frame by frame and readjusting the position of the video clip. So the video clip's actually moving, but it looks like to us, to our eye, it looks like the image has been stabilized. One thing that you may want to do is when you're playing around with the stabilize tool, go into Effect Editor. And again, it does it automatically when you put it on there, but you can turn off this button right here, which is called the Steady Glide button. Okay, so when I turn that off, it should stabilize it even more and be a lot more steady. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into automatic color correction. If you look over here in this window, you'll see color correction and then the color effect. Don't get these mixed up. Color effect allows you to change the color of your clip. If you want to make it black and white, blue, red, boost the contrast, make it brighter, whatever. Color correction allows you to kind of match your clip preceding and after the clip you're trying to adjust. So you can actually set this to be automatic. And we do that, let me call up my example here. So right here, you can see how this clip right here, we're going to automatically color correct this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my project window. I'm going to go into settings. I'm going to go into color correction and go and click on the autocorrect. You see how nothing is selected. So I'm going to click on that, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do HSL auto contrast first, and then I'm going to do HSL auto balance second, and then nothing. And this is usually how most of them are set up. And a good way to remember this, because you may see this on the exam, is reversed alphabetical order. So if you always look at the contrast and balance, contrast first, balance second. contrast first, balance second. So now when I put that, click OK, and I go into my effect palette and click on color correction, when I put my color correction on my clip, so there you can see the difference right there. Kind of brightened it a little bit more. Another cool thing that you can do is add these. Say you wanted to color correct the entire sequence. I can select the to the right tool. So I'm going to hit home on my keyboard. Brings my indicator bar right to the beginning of my sequence. I'm going to click on the to the right button. When I click that, notice how everything highlights to the right. Okay, it's almost like it automatically clicks on my segment tool. Then if I go to my color correction button and double click on it, give it a second, wait for it, it automatically puts my color correction onto my timeline. Okay, so that's really kind of a cool little trick that you can use when you're doing color correction. So simple color correction. Again, under settings, go to correction, auto correct, HSL auto contrast, then HSL auto balance. And that way this should be set as long as you're using your user profile. So automatic color corrections. Let's talk about the fluid morph a little bit. We've talked about jump cuts. So if you watch this clip right here, this is a jump cut.
Basically, it's never been done. No one's ever run that far in that period.
It's almost like you're jumping ahead in time. Okay, his head jerks. That is called a jump cut. Different ways you can fix that. I mean, we could always cover it with B-roll. All right, that's always an option. But say you wanted to keep him up. So a way that we could do this is using the fluid morph button. So if you go into, again, your effect palette, go to illusion effects, and find the fluid morph, which is right here. I'm going to click and drag that and put that right in between my two runner clips. Transition effects always default at 1 second, no matter what, when you bring it over from the effect palette. So I'm actually going to make this maybe 10 frames. So I'm going to highlight down here, type 10, hit enter, and then now I have 10 frames. Remember, these are frames over to the left, over to the right, and seconds over to the left. Okay, so I'm at 10 frames right now. If you look down here, you'll notice how this effect has a dark blue dot on it. Some effects have green dots. This one has a dark blue dot. So if I go to play it, you'll see it's still a jump cut. It didn't work. Because it's a dark blue dot, that means it's going to have to be rendered. So what I'm going to do is go into my effect editor, make sure it's highlighted. And if you notice up here, before we render, I want to point out this little pull-down button, still to still. So what fluid morph does is it actually takes the last frame of the A side and morphs it into the last still frame of the B side. But you can change that. You could change it from stream to stream. If I wanted to actually just do the streaming video, I could do a stream to still or still to stream. So we're going to keep it still to still. I have it at 10 frames, and now I'm going to hit my render button. You can find the render button in a few different places. It's always in the effect editor, okay, usually in the lower left. But we also have it right here in your tool palette, right here. I always thought it looked like a little space capsule, but this is your render button. Go ahead and click on that. Hit OK. It just takes a few seconds to render it. Now, when I go to do my fluid morph, I should have a nice, smooth transition. You definitely don't have the jump cut, but you can notice how his mouth kind of looks a little wacky. So what we can do is maybe 10 frames isn't enough. Okay, so we're going to go back into our effect editor, click on our fluid morph, and we're going to make this maybe 4 frames. So I'm going to type 4 and hit enter. I'm going to re-render and then replay. So that is a little better. You'll probably notice it as the editor, but to the common person who's paying attention to their eyes would never notice the quick fluid morph. The next thing I wanted to show you is how to resize a shot. So let's pick here, we'll pick this one right here. So say we want to resize this shot. All right, I don't really like the wide shot. Maybe I want to bring it in a little bit closer so we can focus on these three guys. So what I'm going to do is go to the resize effect, which is under image. I'm going to click on resize and put it right onto my segment. I'm going to go into my effect editor, and you notice I'm going to get a wireframe around here. So what I want to do is I want to blow up this clip. Okay, I want to make it bigger. So to do that, you can use the scaling parameter to decrease your work size. So what I mean by that, is just a fancy word for these two magnifying glasses. So if I click on the enlarge, notice how I'm making my workspace bigger. I'm not blowing this up. Okay, this isn't what it looks like in the timeline. I'm just increasing my workspace. I'm going to hit the negative. And this is still full screen. You're just decreasing your workspace. All right, so you're seeing outside of your workspace. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the upper right-hand corner, this little square, and I'm going to make my video bigger. And I'm just going to move it, maybe center them a little bit better. Then I'm going to exit my effect editor. Notice how I have a green dot, which means it's a real-time effect, so it doesn't have to be rendered. So when I play it, you can see I resized my shot. But resizing effect, look at the difference when I take this off. And then when I put the resize effect back on, again a little review, put the resize on, effect editor. Again, you can decrease your workspace, make it a little bit bigger. You can reposition it so that way they're centered. And then X out of it, play it, and you have a nice resized shot. Finally, we're going to play around with a little bit of keyframes. So say this shot right here, I want to maybe zoom in on his face while he's looking up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a resize effect. Then I'm going to go into my effect editor. So here, okay, I can adjust the resize. So if I just make it bigger, all right, and I play it, it's not really going to zoom in. It's just going to be bigger. So what I want to do is I want to add keyframes, which are these little purple triangles, and I want to adjust the parameters of these keyframes to make my video move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the beginning of my clip. And I'm going to take my clip, and I'm going to take my frame, and I'm going to make it just regular full screen. Notice as soon as I do that, it adds a keyframe automatically. Then what I'm going to do is to right about here, all right, maybe a few seconds in, I'm going to make this bigger. I'm going to adjust it so that way we're focused on his eyes or his face. Notice how it adds another keyframe, and this one's highlighted in purple. This one has gone gray. So at this keyframe, it's going to be full screen. At this keyframe, it's going to be blown up. So when I play it, you can see how it kind of zooms in on him as he's looking up. Simple keyframes. So that is lesson 7, segment effects. Again, we went over the color correction. We went over the stabilize tool, the resize effect, and adding keyframes. Leon out.